Hello and welcome to the Eleemosynary Moment. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm Brad Hathcock. Welcome to the 100th episode.
We are 100 episodes. My hat, I don't know if you could tell, it says, what does it say? 100
Never looked so good.
never looks so good. Thank you for the hat. Um, I guess before I logged on, I was kind of thinking about this whole thing. And I guess I wanted to ask you, like, what did you think about starting a podcast and then having there's no guarantee we're gonna have anybody actually listen to it, and we don't. I mean, compared to like other podcasts, we don't have a lot of listeners, but we do have listeners all around the world. I see that all the time. Did you think it would turn out the way it did?
No, man. To be honest, I don't even know that I ever had a desire to necessarily start a podcast. I mean, I have an idea for a separate podcast that I would actually love to do, interviewing veterans and things like that, and telling stories about those people that um, aren't, obviously super well known or anything, but there's a whole litany of veterans out there that, don't get to tell their stories. So I think, that's something I find interesting. I know people who would be interested in that. So I've kind of always had that on my brain, but just doing a podcast with a friend where we get to like shoot the shit. No, I never really thought about it. And then I guess the way this kind of came together was you always kind of wanted to do a podcast with another friend of ours. And that just kind of didn't work out. And I was just like, I'll podcast with you. And then, a couple laptops and some different gear later. You know, we are still podcasting. I mean, I'm in a new room, as you can see, studio set up. Um, this mic thing is working out so far, and I figured out something with lighting, so it makes the camera look better. Unfortunately for everyone else, to actually have to see my face clearly and not all grainy. But 100 episodes later, and here we are, still doing the damn thing.
Yeah, it's by the way, I love it. The lighting is great. It kind of makes me want to, I don't know, adjust. I still need a new camera, but yeah, I think from my point of view, it was like, what if we just talked about the shit we always talked about, but just do it on a microphone? And um, I think it's been really fun, because we have covered multiple wars now, and we've covered two different presidents, and um, I don't know. I mean, we saw like assassinations. We've seen um, the whole world order kind of be upended. So like living through that and like recording it, if only for our own sake, is kind of interesting. So yeah, and also just the movies. I mean, that's like our kind of our favorite thing, and that's been really nice to have a record of that as well.
Well, I think what's interesting too is that we weren't even friends for that long. Our friendship started sincerely over a group chat that obviously no longer exists. But I we just kind of like clicked and became friends. We kind of have very similar senses of humor, and for us, it just kind of became like a quick friendship, and we started a podcast. I think in like 6 months of knowing each other or something like that, and
Something like that.
I think we just generally have like good rapport when we talk to each other. Like it's so it makes it easy when you can talk to the person genuinely that's sitting across from you or on the other side of the country from you in this case. But I think that makes it easier. Um, are we killing it out here and getting the most downloads? No, but I genuinely enjoy doing this. So
Yeah, and I do too. And it's always difficult to think about because we don't really plan for what we're going to talk about, and that's kind of fun. And then we do have like similar interests when it comes to like sports, and it's been fun to like dive into that too with you. And I think that I think it's just been really interesting to like schedule, and you try to do it weekly, which we have failed at miserably. I understand, forgiveness on that, but like figuring all that out, you see people do it and they do it full time, and um, we don't make money from this. We just do it because we want to, and
I mean, I would do it full time if we were getting paid for it.
yeah, I mean, I would too,
But
but
like, we have to have jobs.
we have other responsibilities, so making all that work has been a challenge, but um, we you and I handle challenges, so that's not an issue. But there's all these aspects of it that maybe we didn't know going in, and we didn't have a format. We still don't in some ways, but um, we started out kind of like I read about this article, and here's like a deep dive on like this thing I read about on Wikipedia or something, and it was fine or whatever, but it's better if it just flows. So
I
I've
think we
enjoyed that.
had. I think at early on we had a little bit of. We had a little bit of a schedule to like what we wanted to talk about. Like I told you one night I was up all night for some reason thinking about the death penalty and like how that works and um, how that's all brought back and stuff. So I did a deep dive on it, and then we had like a whole discussion on the death penalty. Now that was planned because I said I want to talk about this. But then we've evolved over time where we don't need that. Because you and I are generally up to date on at least modern day topics.
Current
And
events, Brad.
yeah, and it just makes it easier for us to kind of just go with the flow because we both know a little bit about everything, right? Like we're not experts in any one thing, but it does make things flow a little bit easier. But we can go back to that format if you want to,
We
picking
could do it.
topics.
Yeah, we could do that. We could do anything we want because this is just our podcast. Um, so yeah, 100 episodes. Doesn't mean anything, but um, it is a milestone of sorts. So without further ado, and somebody else had 100-day milestone. The president. Do you have
Oh,
thoughts
the
on?
irony, the
Yeah.
irony
Do
that
you have
this
thoughts
is
on
all kind of
that?
coming together. Um, the first 100 days is always kind of a mixed bag for presidents. For Donald Trump, the focus is really on the economy and things like that, for obvious reasons, because he's almost purposely tanking the economy. But that being said, I think we've only seen a potential like 0.4% reduction in GDP over this, I guess, first 100 days or whatever the projections are for this year. Um, you know, the stock market's starting to bounce back. Things are starting to get kind of priced in. So I think it was the S&P 500 or the SPY had like its largest single day increase also in this first 100 days since 2020. So things are starting to bounce back a little bit. The jobs numbers have actually been incredible for Donald Trump. Just last month, adding I think 177,000 jobs. So it's been a bit of a mixed bag. Um, the left is still out here championing, calling him a Nazi and all this other stuff, and he's like pushing this rollback of like desegregation laws, which is in saying that he's going to bring slavery back, which is just a smooth brain response,
Yeah.
since you legally can't, per the Constitution, have slaves. So a lot of these things don't amount to that. But he's definitely had a very mixed bag, I think, in his first 100 days.
I think it's been, from my perspective, bad. Probably worse than I expected, mainly because of the tariffs. Um, but there's also just a general chaos that comes with a lot of the people he picked. And, he put a lot of people in these roles that probably shouldn't, they weren't necessarily qualified for. And so you get things like the Signal chat leaking, or you get Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic added to the Signal chat. And that's how we all found out about this anyway. Um, and those are all like kind of avoidable, but because he just does whatever he's going to do, these are decisions that are unwise, and yet also he's been effective in other ways because he's already done this before. So he's going he's got the experience to, whether we like it or not, issue more executive orders since FDR. And I think his foreign policy has been mixed as well. So I'm going to
Yeah,
give him, if you had to give him like a letter grade, what would you give him?
probably like a D. I mean, it's
That's probably what I
technically
would do it.
still passing, right? I think the MAGA cult that's out there is still going to support him no matter what. I think that's the big problem, right? Because when we're talking about polling, like CNN wanted to bring up a poll that they did that had him at, I think like a 32% approval rating or something, but they polled less than 2,000 people, and all of those people had actually signed up to be polled in the first place. And as we know, Republicans typically stay away from polling to begin with, so who knows how accurate these things are. Um, if you ask Chuck Schumer, it's a huge deal. But then when they brought up his 17% approval rating in polls, he goes, "Well, polls come and go." Literally, from one saying that, well, his polling is down, and like their whole spiel was, as soon as his approval rating comes below 40%, that's when we're gonna attack, right? Um, so it'll be interesting to see what their plan of attack is. But where Donald Trump is still winning is on the border. I mean,
Oh,
border
show.
crossings are down something like 97%, and he was able to do that um, without having to really pass any additional laws. Whereas the last administration was like, well, we have to, pass X number of laws in order to do these things, and that just was not true. Um, he's still winning in that regard. But overall, he seems to be having this pretty losing strategy. He's just left and right and all over the place on his tariffs. I mean, we were up to what, 200 some percent tariffs on China, and then they started making exemptions and all this other stuff. I think it had something like 10,000 exemptions in it.
You have to have the exemptions because you'll
Of course.
you'll literally tank the economy. That's why
Right.
it's,
Well,
that's
then
what
China was like, "Hey, we're gonna do another 86% tariff on the United States." And then they were like, "Oh wait, but also not on these things, because I guess apparently the US provides a lot of chips for cars that China needs." And so they were like, "Oh, we won't tariff those things because we need them too." And so they're just getting into this like dick measuring contest that just doesn't seem to be good for anyone.
that would be shocking news to somebody who thinks we don't export anything. Um,
I was shocked that we export chips to them, because it's largely considered, like, a lot of our chips obviously come from Taiwan and stuff like that, but like because they own like 90 or 95% of like the rare earth minerals that are required to make these kinds of things. um Shocking that we actually send chips to them and not vice versa.
yeah, you're right. Um, yeah, I would probably give it a D as well. That's actually the first thing that came to my mind because there there's so much self-inflicted damage caused, which I think you're going to see in the numbers you cited in the future. I mean, you could say the jobs numbers were good, but none of that's really none of this is all settled in yet. So I think it's going to get really bad no matter what. Um,
Well, so if you ask, right, because Donald Trump is doing this, he's sitting there going, "Oh well, the GDP going down 0.4%. That's from the Biden administration, right?"
it may be.
Um,
I don't know.
and if you were to, with everything going bad, right, if you ask a Democrat, they're going to sit here and say, "Well, that's all Trump stuff." But anything that would be positive in regards to the economy, they would be like, "Well, that's just leftover from the Biden administration." It's, again, it comes down to like smooth brain ideas, right? Like, if it's negative, it's against the party in power. If it's positive, it was the previous party in power. Like, you know there's there's no actual like discourse amongst Republicans and Democrats where they can agree. It's just always my side this, my side that. and they don't work together. Like, they don't want to work together. We see that now with like John Fetterman. His entire staff is trying to basically take him down and like
He
take
can't
away his
drive well,
passwords
Brad.
to his social media. And I mean, but see, here's the thing, right? The right was sitting here trying to tell you that there's no way he should be running for office after he had his stroke and then was institutionalized or whatever for depression. Like, the right was saying we can't have him running. Like, are you serious? Comes out, beats Dr. Oz, which wasn't difficult. Probably, in my opinion, Dr. Oz is a horrible candidate. And then all of a sudden, the left doesn't think that, they think the opposite of what they thought before because he's not in lockstep with the Democrats right now. So this is all just a huge game that gets played with people's lives, pretty much.
Yes, and Fetterman's wife was on the record as well. So apparently she hates Israel. This is all why. It comes back to Israel and his vocal support of Israel. And that was where they turned on him. And they continue to turn on him. And that was a really interesting piece because the right had a good point, which is like the guy had a stroke and you're kind of just pushing him out there and he's saying like hello and good night. And it's like, what? And then here he is, kind of recovered fully, and he just has this one issue that he really cares deeply about, and that's a bridge too far for them. And so yeah, they're
Well,
gonna
and
get
he went to Mar-a-Lago.
yeah, but everybody
God
did. So
forbid you go to
yeah,
Mar-a-Lago.
you can't do that. But I mean, Gretchen Whitmer's kind of in the same boat a little bit. I mean, she's been photographed at the White House, and she's been photographed in Wisconsin or Michigan. She's from Michigan, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, but they're not really going after her, which tells me that this is all about Israel, and the left just can't. They just hate Israel. So anyway, the John Fetterman thing was interesting, but I do want to kind of circle back to the foreign policy of Trump because it's the most interesting to me because I think it's easy to call the tariffs bad or say that these are bad ideas and it's just hurting yourself. But on the foreign policy front, Mike Waltz was his national security advisor, and recently part of that Signal group chat was not fired but demoted, you could say, to the UN. He's going to be nominated now as the ambassador, whereas before he was in a position where he didn't need to go through Senate confirmation. So now he's going to go through Senate confirmation, and a lot of that signal stuff's going to be brought up, I'm sure. So that's been a little chaotic, and Steve Witkoff, his I don't know what his position is, but the chief negotiator for all the problems they're going to solve, right, which are completely unsolved: Ukraine, Israel, China, Saudi Arabia. He's going to the
Day
Middle East this
one.
week. Yeah.
Day one.
So these are all like points of contention, and I don't know if you'd want to like sort of put a microscope on any one of the big four, but Iran, that's a fifth one. I'll like kind of put that in the Israeli bucket. Do you have any thoughts on any of these that you want to touch on?
Well, the Iran thing I think is very interesting because Trump is taking kind of a very hard rhetoric towards Iran. I mean, he's actually threatened to bomb any potential like nuclear sites that they have and stuff like that to try and destroy them. So he's already kind of talked about bombing a sovereign nation. Regardless of what anybody thinks of that, right or wrong. That's tough rhetoric for a president to use, especially because we aren't inherently considered at war with Iran. So, you know, per the per the separation of powers, you would technically have to declare war against Iran, and that has to be done by Congress. But under the what AUMF or whatever, he's gonna say something like, "Oh well, they attacked Israel" or something along those lines, or they threatened him. He could probably go and use the fact that Iran was actively trying to assassinate him as an act of war, to probably authorize use of the AUMF and just indiscriminately start bombing Iran. So that's kind of an interesting one. Um, from the economic perspective, they were supposed to have allegedly like 73 countries already coming to the table, that I guess Witkoff and Besant were supposed to kind of create deals with. And now I think one so far they've gotten done, maybe. And others to come. But why does anybody even want to come to the table when he's just on and off again throwing these tariffs? Like, you just never know one day to the next what's going to happen. So it's kind
Ye-
of like, what's the point?
Yeah, let me give my thoughts on the foreign policy stuff, and then we should probably talk about the film industry tariffs because that was actually really bizarre. But I will say that we are we are being attacked by Iran via their proxies, and we are bombing Yemen and the Houthis, and we bombed their airport because they shot a rocket at Ben Gurion Airport and it actually got through in Israel, and it hurt 6 people. Um, and yeah, a lot of those systems they have in place to defend against missile attacks did fail. And as far as Iran goes, I think it's safe to say that America would probably be in a better position to support Israel in that bombing effort if it came to that, because we would just provide them with like air refueling and all the things like that, the operative support, and then they would just go in and do the actual bombing, um, which would be in line with the whole like no forever wars. We can never do anything. We have to stay out of it. But a
Yeah,
third
he's just going to start every proxy war known to
he'll just
man.
use
I
another
mean,
country. But I do think that's interesting. And Israel's getting they just issued their, I don't know what they call it, like the call up for all the reservists. They're going to go back into Gaza again. Not this week, not with Trump in the Middle East, but after he leaves, I can see that's going to happen. And um, hopefully that ends whatever's going on there, because that's like unsustainable. They can't do that forever.
well, some hardcore lefties are posing it like this, in terms of going back into Gaza, that they've shut off a lot of the aid and stuff that even gets in there, and that they're actively starving Palestinians, right? And that they are going to use the guise of like, well, we have to go in and like free these people and help them so that they're not starving anymore. And then they'll just find an insurgency there, and start attacking again. That's kind of how some of the hardcore lefties are putting it.
Well, I mean, they're right in the sense that Hamas is starving the population. So, yes, they stopped aid because the aid was going to Hamas. And I mean, if everybody was honest, they would just say, like, if you get rid of Hamas, then that would solve a problem for everybody. But they can't say that because it would show support for anybody but the terrorists. And they still have an American hostage there. So, these things matter. Optics matter. But
Hostage, more like, corpse.
yeah, I would say by the end of this, they're not going to get anybody else out, which I think is why they're probably going to do it. As far as Ukraine and Russia goes, I think that's been just a debacle. Putin spit in their face. He said they weren't going to give any concessions. Obviously, Zelensky's like, yeah, we'll do the mineral deal, because what does that matter? I mean, it doesn't mean anything. Um, the minerals are all in Russian occupied territory anyway. But yeah, that's been kind of a disaster. It's still not clear what's going to happen there. And then I should just mention that, if you start an economic war with China, you could turn that into a hot war. I mean, those things are unpredictable. So um, I think that matters too.
So in terms of Ukraine, I thought I saw Zelensky say the other day, at least in an article, that they are close to signing a ceasefire, like any day. Um, I don't know how much truth there is to that, but it doesn't. I don't think it poses him any benefit to say that in any regard, really. I guess there has to be a modicum of truth to it. But um, as far as like starting an economic war with China, a lot of people are saying that the Europeans could kind of lean on China more, and kind of increase the Chinese influence. But China has taken the tack that like any deals that you make that hurt China there's going to be very severe and swift repercussions for that. So that's an open threat, in my opinion.
Hmm?
So are you going to cut deals with the people who make these threats to you? I mean, the thing is, all right, we're gonna have 4 years of this. Okay, this was all in the first 100 days. We're gonna see this for the next 4 years. But what we know is that Trump's economic strategy of trying to bring these jobs back and things like that wouldn't even be reflected in our economy for probably almost a good 10 years,
Yeah.
if they continue, because it takes, I believe, on average 10 years to build a manufacturing site for something. And um, it's kind of the same thing when we talked before about getting crude oil from Venezuela and it not being possible really because we don't have the manufacturing sites here in the US to actually turn it into like usable oil, um, because of how, I guess, how crude it is in general, right? So that infrastructure itself would take like 10 plus years to set up. So is it that Trump is thinking long term and seeing, a long term uh, deal here, and trying to build out for a long term? Because if you look at the thought processes between these other countries who maybe don't have elections like we do, where we have a new president every 4 years, they think hundreds of years ahead, right? They're like, well, this will be good for China in 100 years or 1,000 years. And um, the US, we don't think like that. We think in terms of like 1 to 2 years ahead. Um, and so their strategies can serve them better in the long run for a short term hit. But because we don't do that, any short term hits kind of end up being long term losses because we just reverse course and keep losing on it because we've half built an infrastructure, right? And half ass everything. So I don't know, man. Like,
I would pose that. I would ask you to answer your own question because, from my perspective, there's long term thinking, but they're doing it in a very quick timeline that isn't going to work. So, if you wanted a 10-year plan, you would take your time to get it all right instead of doing it like we got to do this within like it's got to be 24 hours, man.
sure. But, and we've actually talked about this before. Here's part of the issue with that, right? Our government works very, very slowly
As it
on
should.
everything. On everything. Okay. It works very slowly on everything. It takes forever to get something done. And I was having this conversation with my brother, and you know how I feel about the federal government and stuff, and they won't regulate themselves down. Like, okay, they will never do something that flies in the face of the federal government in its entirety. And so you can't like legislate properly to do those like long-term things, right? Because it takes forever. Everybody wants their piece, which is always a short-term gain. So we never do anything for the long term because we can't pass things through government. I mean, quite simply, in the last 100 days, what have, other than what this was, it the Save Act that they passed, um
I
and
don't
like
recall. I know where
maybe
you're
like
going
the
with this
Lake
though.
and Riley Act, right?
Yeah.
Republicans haven't done anything. So like
That's because they're
everything that
scared
Donald
shitless.
exactly, they don't want to be primaried. Like everything that Donald Trump is doing can easily be undone by the next administration if it's not a Republican. So it's not going to go anywhere. Like it's just all going to be rolled back, maybe, because I believe that the Biden administration actually upheld like 60% or so of Donald Trump's previous executive orders and stuff. So who knows? Like we just, again, we do everything by executive order. We don't legislate anymore. Like what's the point of even having Congress at this point? They don't do anything.
Well, I mean, that's where you're right to a point, but then there was the infrastructure bill that did get passed, and um, I again, I don't know what the fruits of that will be for a while because it's going to be a long time, but that was something that did get passed, and it can happen, but Yeah, where they are right now in this administration, I would say Congress is pretty much gonna have to. The Republicans are gonna eat some shit for the next 2 years, and then I think that the midterms are going to be kind of awful for them. So yeah, like we talk
It's an
about
interesting strategy to have a majority and in
not do anything.
government and have every branch of government and literally do nothing with it.
That's the whole
Like
Trump plan, though, right?
at least when Obama had it, he like did something on healthcare for better or worse, regardless, for better or worse, he did something on it. But like Republicans, they took the majority. They said this is a mandate. Like, we're gonna do all these things, and they've done nothing. So
They will continue to not do anything because this administration has no. You're talking about Obama, who, love him or hate him, was was that guy. He was really good at doing that thing and making convincing arguments. And we are not. We're so far beyond that that like I don't think Biden ever made an argument that was convincing. I don't think Trump has ever made an argument that's convincing. And if you don't have that, you lose the public, and then you lose, in
you just
politics.
named two people that can't put two coherent thoughts together.
It's not
So
good.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm all I'm doing is pointing it out, but
we're now going to have 12 straight years where we have somebody in office who can't actually coherently think. So I mean,
yeah,
it's a problem. I mean, you know, even so, like even worse on the Republicans. If we're talking about as a whole, everything with Doge, like Doge said they were going to find $2 trillion to cut to get us back to pre-COVID spending, which they should just cut all COVID spending completely out of the budget, right? Um, but instead they ended up reducing it down to like 1 trillion, and now it's like 1.65 billion or something. Like it's some minuscule number when it comes to government spending. And now Elon Musk is leaving Doge, and they're gonna keep doing something, I guess. I don't know, but they've done nothing. We haven't cut spending. We're gonna increase spending, and it's just gonna get worse.
it's because they won't touch entitlements. The federal spending, it it was a thing, but it was not. You were not. It was not the central issue. You were not going to go into USAID and do what they did, and then suddenly it's all great again because they didn't go into Social Security and they didn't go into Medicare.
The
And
thing is that like they kind of Social Security is going to end up taking care of itself, right? Because
yeah,
another thing I see that lefties talk about is Republicans want you to have kids, and if you are focused on people having kids, you're just about eugenics or like whatever, some bullshit, right? That's not true. Like the way Social Security really works is like they need young people to continue to pay into Social Security to pay for the people who are going to either be on Social Security or are currently on Social Security because they're not paying into it, right? So you kind of need uh, replacement rates of children to continue on. And instead, you're sitting here saying, well, Republicans want you to have kids because they probably want you to be white and have kids, right? Like that's what Republicans, according to the left, are like talking about. But what they're really saying is you can't continue on the path of Social Security the way it is because it will be insolvent, I think, in the next decade. They keep saying that, but then they just keep changing the retirement age so that people keep paying into it. And that's why we still have Social Security today. But if you don't replace the younger generation and less people are having kids every day, you have less and less money coming into Social Security and you can't pay for it now. So they have to do something to fix it. And their reform will literally be I think the retirement age is like 68 now. They'll just throw it up to 70. And then, we got 2 more years of funding this shit to go on. And it's just going to be worse and worse.
yeah, we often predicted this many times over the years that whoever is the last person in that musical chair at the end, or whatever the metaphor you want to use is, that they'll be stuck with the problem, and that's what's going to happen. So these nobody in this administration is going to solve any of this, and that's why you're not going to see a
Nope.
reduction in the spending that was
And
promised.
Also, interestingly enough, we have talked about this. The value of the dollar is down. Um, I think down close to 10% or something like that. Um, Even though it's considered the worldwide reserve currency, its value is still down, as far as I know. I think it was 10%, which we kind of talked about this previously. You know, you and I have long been predicting a recession on this channel, regardless of who's in office. Really, it was going to happen, and it's definitely going to happen now. I think there's only one Bank of America, I think, was like, oh, there's not going to be a recession, but they're one of the worst banks in the country. So, like, am I going to take them on their word? No. When everyone else is sitting here saying that we're going to have a recession, I think we will. It's just, how do you prepare for it?
Yeah, it's just like you just sit back and go like, congratulations, you digitize the retirement paperwork of federal employees. Um, and you made all these big promises, but you didn't understand any of it, and you failed. I think it is a failed enterprise, because they didn't do what they had to. So I just should mention because we do like movies, that there's this idea that we would tariff movies from overseas. I thought this was interesting and incredibly stupid, and this is why. California doesn't make movies anymore. We don't produce films here. Um, we make them in Georgia. Georgia will pay you to make a movie there. That's where like Tyler Perry's studio is. It's in Georgia. Everything's made in Georgia. Marvel, Georgia. Um, I can't think of anything that would benefit Gavin Newsom more than tariffing films that are made overseas, because it's cheaper to make a movie overseas and fly all the people out from LA than it is to do it in LA. And I don't know why this guy thought this was. I don't know who got to him. It wasn't his idea. There's no way he came up with this. But do you have any thoughts on how insane this would be? Because it doesn't make any sense to me. Like
I
everything.
mean, it's definitely going to hurt Netflix for sure.
Netflix is fucked.
They're so fucked because 90% of their movies are like Indian movies or Korean movies or something. So they're
Or
fucked
yeah, they got
for
the
sure.
dramas, the TV shows. They get them from Mexico. They get them from like, I think other, maybe even Israel. That one show might be on there. So yeah, the streamers are absolutely fucked.
I think this is. I think the whole thing's fucking stupid, right? But this has to be a direct response to China being like, well, we're not going to allow U.S. movies in here anymore. And so Trump was like, okay, well, then we'll just tariff all movies made outside of the United States. Um, which makes no sense because, like you said, most of them are made outside of the United States. One of our favorite series, Mission Impossible, that's about to come out May 23rd, I believe. Clearly going to be shot mostly outside of the United States, likely.
You don't say.
Most movies are these days. I mean, a lot of movies take place in like Europe or something, or at least they shoot there. Um, but we do have hubs here. I guess everyone's going to go to Atlanta to shoot movies, or
Texas.
some people do Philadelphia or somewhere in Pennsylvania as well. New York. I guess those are where you will shoot all the movies now.
They don't make them here, but I like I said, I think this would only help Gavin Newsom, and that's about it. But also, there's a movie in China right now it's an animated movie. It's a sequel, and it's made about $2 billion with a B dollars in China. So like China doesn't have a problem with their films making money. What they have a problem with is our movies being released there, and them not liking the messages, or if it has ghosts, we can't have it in China. That kind of stuff.
Right.
And
So
it,
did it actually make $2 billion? Are they saying it made $2 billion, or did they line you all up and force you to go see it and say we'll fuck up your social credit score if you don't see this movie, and that's why it made $2 billion?
maybe it's that China sucks and they have no culture, and so they have the animated movie, and that's all you can watch. Because they really don't release a lot of movies here. I mean, they release our Disney movies and stuff like that, but I mean, even those they censor them heavily. So, and also, you know what though, in some ways I'm kind of like, you know what, fuck you Hollywood, because you wanted to make all this money for a while there, where you were going to censor your movies, or you were going to put some Chinese messaging in there that only Chinese people would see. Like in apparently in Barbie, there's like they give China, like she's drawing a map out of crayon, whatever the fuck the context is, and she gives China like a little bit more of the land or the sea around Vietnam. Little things like that. Americans would never pick up on that, and the Chinese absolutely would. And Hollywood's been doing that for so long. I'm kind of like, you know what? Fuck you guys for doing that. Like, you sold out American values for $1, and you kind of deserve it.
Did
That
we
you got
just
here.
find a tariff you like? Is that what we did?
I just think Hollywood sucks, man. And like like there were some moves, right? Like there was in Top Gun Maverick, the original trailer, they took the Taiwan flag off of the patch off of his jacket, and I think they ended up adding that back in. So sometimes they have the balls to do that at the expense of whatever money they're going to lose overseas.
Well,
But
sure. Remember John Cena had to like issue an apology for something he said about China?
he issued it in Mandarin, one of the most pathetic things I've ever seen. So I'm not like go tariff them, but at the same time, I'm like, you know what? On a culture war front, if this sends a message to Hollywood that you should probably make movies that are American, that have American values, because American values are good, Chinese values are bad, censorship bad. Maybe that's a good message to send to them. I don't know. And Netflix is just the latest example of that. So maybe they do get fucked in it. I don't know, but there comes I have a limit on that kind of nonsense.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny you said censorship bad because, here in America, Republicans are supposed to be the party of non-censorship,
Oh
but
boy.
that's absolutely not true.
Yeah.
Um, they
Go on,
are
explain it. Yeah.
100% the party of censoring people.
Can you elaborate this a little bit? Is there a specific example? Because I read about this recently.
Oh no, by all means, go ahead. I point to a number of things with them trying to control certain parts of the media and things like that as well.
The lawsuits against like 60 Minutes, which I'm like
That
fuck.
one,
I'm like
that
fuck
one holds a
60
little
Minutes.
bit of merit though, because they did actively edit Kamala Harris's interview to make it seem like she was actually doing well when she
Which
wasn't.
was
So,
awesome, because
uh,
like she's so bad that they tried to help and it didn't even help. It actually hurt. But another example would be the campus protests. I loathe these people, I do. People in masks, keffiyehs out there, and they're just spouting hateful bullshit. And they're really just undermining the American system in general. And that is freedom of speech. And I'm sorry, but you might not like it. It's tough for me because I hate what they're saying, but I have to defend the principle. And so in some ways you would say like that would be also like anti-free speech, even though
right.
fuck those
Well,
people.
it's kind of interesting because they're attempting to take away the funding for any universities that allow pro-Palestinian protesting and all this other stuff, or pro-Hamas protesting, as some people would put it. Personally, I was at Penn State's campus. I saw them. Um, there was a group on campus that was holding pro-Palestinian signs and things like that. Do I think that Penn State should lose its funding for that? No. I personally just don't believe that the federal government should be funding universities in the first place. They should kind of have to earn their money on their own. That's
Especially
why.
not Harvard and Columbia, which have like like hundreds of billions of dollars in endowments.
Oh yeah, and then you still see tuition like increases constantly, and so I don't believe that the federal government should be funding universities in the first place. Kind of live and let die situation, in my opinion. But should they be taking all of this funding away only because of this, or only because of like DEI? No, they should be doing it just because they should say we don't fund universities anymore. Um, but
Yeah,
they're
because
they're kind of trying to like strong arm them, and so we're actually seeing a coalition of universities come together and say that they will share resources in order to fight the Trump administration when it comes to defunding or whatever other strong arm tactic that the Trump administration wants to take. So I think the Pac-10 or whatever football all said that they are going to band together as one and share resources in order to fight the Trump administration if he attempts to do something to one of those universities. So I find that part pretty interesting because you're putting these people together now, and you're forming coalitions against yourself. And you're gonna hurt yourself when it comes midterms time because you're pissing off whole groups of people, and now you're pissing off rich people because their kids are gonna get upset that you did something to Harvard, and you spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to get them in there in the first place. So um
yeah, well,
eh,
and JD Vance broke their trophy too, which I'm sure pissed them off.
that shit was funny. So I don't care. I think that shit's funny. But the thing is, this administration is doing everything it can to hurt itself.
Yeah, yeah.
It all they really had to do really was come in and do something about immigration and probably not tariff anybody, and their approval rating would probably still be in the 50%. Um, it's they're just doing everything that they can to hurt themselves, which is interesting.
Biden did
You
it,
know,
and it worked to a T. So, I mean,
s-
there's the blueprint for that.
but we're even, all this arguing back and forth with judges and like defying Supreme Court orders. I don't believe inherently that you should defy a Supreme Court order. Democrats are trying to make a big deal about it, even though Biden defied a Supreme Court order when it came to student loan forgiveness. And AOC went on TV and said that, the Supreme Court is extremist and they handed down a ruling, and I think the Biden administration should ignore it and all this other stuff. Like, you know, there's just all this going on, and what I find funny obviously is like the MAGA cult is defending everything, like instead of actually looking at it from a constitutional standpoint. They're just defending everything that Trump does. Now, do I believe that a district judge should have the ability to weasel itself into foreign affairs that the government is doing? Probably not. Because really, the highest law of the land should be the Supreme Court, right? When it comes to holding any administration accountable, um, that's probably correct because we're seeing that now, right? Like Republicans trying to say, well, federal district judges shouldn't be able to issue warrant or issue stays from the bench and like all this other stuff as well. In terms of obviously the immigration things that are going on. But I would be interested to see how much money the Trump administration is going to spend of taxpayer dollars fighting all this shit in court because it's going to be astronomical. He's getting sued for everything.
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff he's doing is kind of, I would question it. Not all of it, but some things are bad, and
Question everything. You should always question
yeah, of
everything when it comes
course.
to the federal government, in my opinion.
But like uh, this kid that got I call him a kid. He's like 30. The guy that went to El Salvador. They could have asked him to be returned, and they didn't, and that's like an
Sure,
unnecessary fight. Like, you just waste political capital. Like, just return him. Trump saying things like, "You can't have 5 million trials. You wouldn't have a country left." I think that's like a
sure.
actual quote, and it's like, "Oh,
But
actually, we can. If that's what you want to do, then we can."
But tell me how the Democrats can sit here and defend Abrego Garcia, which they have actually seemed to have stopped doing,
Yeah,
um,
it looked bad.
be, because he has two uh, domestic abuse violations against him. So that came out. There was like, supposedly, I haven't verified the authenticity of this video, but active video of him trafficking people in a truck. and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like he definitely is a known MS-13 gang member. So is this the hill that they want to die on?
Yes.
I
It
It
wasn't until the
was.
polling came in.
It was because they all said, "Oh, I'm going to El Salvador, and I'm not coming back until he's coming with us." And here they're all back in the United States because they don't care.
Yeah, that was a huge. Again, they are so lost that I don't. The only way they can ever get out of this is for the Trump administration to allow them, and that's kind of what they're doing. Because I mean, otherwise they are just out there defending criminals. They're just saying you cannot. Like a judge is like, I have to protect this person who's on trial, and it's like you can't. Why? They're bad people. You don't have to do that, but they do. They do it, and the virtue signaling thing is no, it doesn't have any currency anymore. They're doing it. It looks bad. Americans don't like it. And boy, they just have,
Dude, they can't help themselves but do it.
yeah, I
Okay,
know.
like like we had been texting about like the articles of impeachment that were drawn up
Oh,
against
yeah.
Trump already, right?
Yeah.
Like that's 1,000% a virtue signal. You know for a fact it's not going anywhere.
He
You
needs
you
to actually
know
do
for a
something
fact
you
it's
can
not
impeach
going
him
anywhere.
for. Which, by
Right.
the way, the perfect phone call was probably not something he should have been impeached for. January 6th was something he should have been impeached for. So
Agreed.
there, you have this thing where you want to impeach him for something, and then you do it for I don't know, no gain, and then you actually do have to impeach him. So, which is going to happen probably down the road when he does ignore or defy the Supreme Court, and I could see that happening. I think he would, even though he says he wouldn't. I think he would try.
Well, I think it's important to note that I think most recently uh, he was asked a question, I think about upholding the Constitution, and if he is required to uphold the Constitution, he goes, I don't know.
Yeah, he said, like, yeah.
He's just like, I don't know.
I mean,
Do I?
the guy promised he swore an oath to defend it. He's never read it. I'm not expecting that to change this time around.
I
Um,
don't think he can read.
it's unclear. We don't know that. But no, he could tweet, so there's that. But also, like, he was on this interview with Kristen Welker, and she was like, you can't do a third term, right? And he's like, well, yeah. And then he finally name dropped who we haven't mentioned yet. Um, he said, like, oh, my successor might be Marco or JD Vance, which was interesting because I don't think anybody right now. Marco Rubio has 4 jobs. I don't know if you know this, but he's like Secretary of State. He's the head of USAID. He's the head of like the Congressional Records Office or something. He's got like a lot of titles right now. And I guess he's like kind of on the front of his mind, and whoever he endorses in the future, that's going to be the guy, right? So I did think that
Yeah,
was
but dude,
interesting.
Rubio is totally turned heel. Like,
It's been
remember,
embarrassing.
right? Remember him arguing with Trump on the campaign trail and in the like debates and stuff
Of
like early
course.
on. And I forget what he called Marco Rubio. He had a nickname for him,
Little
and
Marco.
yeah, and it's just like, dude, you totally turned heel just to get a better job than the one you had, and so that you can write, I don't know, 10 books when you come out of office and make a ton of money. Like that's what you've done. Um,
Well, I'll tell you what. I thought Marco Rubio was a great pick for Secretary of State.
right, and
I
then
have
he just became a mouthpiece.
I was wrong. Now I don't know what he really believes. All I know is what he says. But what he says is not in alignment with what he used to believe.
No,
And for him, it's bad because I did think he was like one of the few senators who actually had their shit together, and that's been really pathetic.
I think a lot of this administration is really pathetic. You know, a lot of people are making a big deal about RFK, who says he's gonna find the reason for autism, right?
Uh huh.
And people are finding a lot of fault with things that RFK is doing, but he is banning a lot of those food dyes, which was high on my list of things that I wanted to happen, and should be high on the list of things that other people want to happen. Anyone
But
who
why,
points,
man?
because they're not good for you. A lot of those food dyes are banned in pretty much every other developed nation except for ours because they're considered poison.
Yeah,
So
but what I mean, just because a country bans something doesn't mean it's bad. I don't know. I actually am curious because I hear this argument all the time, and I'm like, what makes it bad? Why does the government have to get involved in this?
I mean, I know people who are allergic to red dyes. So it severely limits things that you can have, right? But over in Europe, you can have the same foods or whatever that in the US use red dyes, but they don't use red dye. They use some kind of like dye derived from beets or something like that. It's not synthetic dyes. So that makes a big difference. So it's those things I'm interested in, and I stand behind him in that regard.
But
The
why
one
that,
thing,
man? Go ahead. Sorry.
no, go ahead. Like with that, like
No, I was
why
just gonna bitch because like that's what he's picking when we could like stop. We could start deregulating like the FDA and all these. Like, why are we not eliminating the bureaucracy for drug use for things like that? I don't get it.
low hanging fruit, in my opinion, right?
Yeah,
So that's something that's easily implementable that a lot of people stand behind. And I feel like if you can implement some of those things and actually get your approval rating, not the Trump approval rating, but like RFK does, these say 5 things that are actually very popular, and maybe you see a difference, then you can start to do some of the bigger things. So maybe he's trying to take like a snowball effect in that regard. I don't know for sure, but I that could be the route that he's trying to take. He's already trying to make recommendations for no longer putting fluoride in drinking water, which is actually happening in Florida now. They already, I think, passed a law to get rid of fluoride in drinking water, which you and I have talked about before.
I think
And
we really disagreed on it, if anything.
well, I don't agree or disagree with it inherently. I mean, the only real benefit it has to you is it decreases your chance of getting cavities by 25%. That's not a lot, in my opinion. Um, so the benefits, they already make toothpaste without fluoride and a bunch of other things like without fluoride. So it doesn't really matter, I guess, in my opinion.
Hmm.
They're small things. Like, I would like personally to see him get um, the law removed where you can't sue pharmaceutical companies. I person like number one thing I would love to see is no longer protecting pharmaceutical companies from vaccine injuries and things like that. Um, that would severely change the landscape of pharmaceuticals in this country. I guarantee it.
I just wish that one of these guys, that somebody could get in there and just tell them, like, look, let people take experimental medication or from pharmaceutical companies. Make it easier for people to try that kind of care. Get these drugs off of the schedules, things like that. I don't know why they don't do that kind of stuff. I guess I do know because we've just talked about it. We spent an hour on it, but
Well, we can tie this all in, right? So let's talk about a movie, right? Dallas Buyers Club.
sure,
Okay,
perfect.
phenomenal movie, right?
It's
It's
a great
perfect.
movie.
It fits, one, our movie discussion, and two, the discussion we're currently having. All of the drugs that he was going to Mexico for were not FDA regulated. Um, and they helped him live years when he had what, like a couple of months maybe to live. And people were actively taking AZT, which was known to be actually actively killing people. That was a Fauci drug out there. So you get the Fauci ouchie when you take AZT,
This is
and
the '80s, dude. Just to
right,
be clear, yeah.
and the thing is that nothing has really changed. Like, the
No,
FDA only approves like 1 in 10 drugs that even come its direction, and they need to bump that number up a
yeah,
hundred
that's the kind
percent.
of shit that bothers me. Like that's what I want to see is I just want more freedom in that particular area. Although I would like more freedom broadly, but
Well, it would severely bring down the cost of pharmaceutical drugs. If we were able to import drugs from other countries and things like that, which we don't do because we have peak protectionism on pharmaceutical companies here, we would see a free fall of prices in pharmaceutical drugs, and we just won't do it.
I
It's
could steel man that. I could steel man it about, development costs and what America's burden is versus the rest of the world. I could probably get that argument. I'm not going to here, but you're right. And I just think like the entire FDA just needs to be reevaluated. I just don't think it's going to happen. And this is a good opportunity for that because there's nobody in this administration that's from the inside. They're not people who are part of the bureaucracy or anything. So you have the opportunity. We'll see. I didn't have anything else besides that. That was my brilliant thought. Just let us take the drugs, people.
right. We've been doing our we're at an hour now, so this would be we've done over 100 hours of podcasting.
Well
Um,
over.
Definitely over 100 because our movie podcasts are 2.5 hours long.
Yeah. Would you like to end on a positive note?
Sure. What do you got?
Well, I was gonna say either do you have like a favorite like memory from what we've done so far, or maybe like a favorite episode or topic we debated, or kind of putting you on the
Man,
spot.
you are. It's hard because I love the movie episodes that you and I do. They're great. Um, we put a lot of thought and effort into watching movies every year, because it's one of our favorite things to do, and it's just hard to beat those episodes because don't focus on any other bullshit. We just talk about movies for 2.5, 3 hours straight, and that's they're my some of my favorite episodes for sure.
Yeah, for me too. I would say it was great having Dan on a couple times. I enjoyed. I think we did our citizenship test. That was quite enjoyable.
That was a good time. Yeah,
Epic
I enjoyed
fail.
that one.
So that comes to mind.
I would sincerely like to get more guests on here. I think we could have some very interesting conversations, and a wide variety of topics. I think would be great, to choose from.
Yeah, you're
So
right. It's so goddamn hard to schedule stuff like that. It's hard with two people, and then you're like, oh, you got to schedule three, and then it's suddenly like an impossibility.
it is.
So
I have guests that I had in mind that I have tried to talk to. I have a friend who works for ICE, so I would have loved to talk to him. I've asked him numerous times over the last few years to come on. Um, I have a cousin who works in the EPA, and I would love to have him on, and especially after the that train derailed, or blew up in Ohio. I wanted to talk to him about that kind of thing and stuff, but there's a lot of hoops to jump through, especially with people who work for the government, like those two people I just mentioned. Um, and it just makes it very, very hard to get people onto a podcast, even one like ours, which doesn't have the reach of, you know, uh, other podcasts. Um, and it just definitely makes it very difficult, but doesn't mean I'm going to stop trying. Um, I would like to try and schedule one that will actually be about movies.
yeah,
With
we talked
this,
about it. It's just been a rough month.
it would have to be on like a Saturday. So we just have to say, hey, this particular Saturday, we're just gonna gun for it and come whatever may, and I'll definitely see if I can get them. Um, I really love his take on movies and stuff like that, and he gets to watch all kinds of like sweet stuff. Like he just did a breakdown of um, the Predator trailer and all of the skulls that you see in the Predator trailer because they collect skulls of their prey and stuff. And there was one that it was so cool because you wouldn't even know it was actually the skull of a thing called the Pilot, which was actually from The Thing,
Mm.
from a deleted scene in The Thing that ended up not making the final cut of the movie because it didn't test well, and they completely just like ignored it. Um, And so the story behind it is the spaceship that crashes at the beginning of the thing is actually flown by one of those pilots, and those pilots, they go around and like collect specimens from other planets, and they actually collected the thing, and they realized they fucked up, so they crash landed on Earth, and the pilot died. So it's technically there would have been two different aliens on the ship in the thing, the pilot and then the thing alien. And the thing ended up being the only one that you see because they cut out the pilot part. But in the trailer for the new Predator movie, it has one of the skulls of of the pilot from the thing, because 20th Century Studios owns the thing and is also doing the new Predator film.
And I believe the other skull I thought you were going to mention, and I don't know why you didn't, but also apparently one of the skulls is the alien from Independence Day.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's every skull that you would see there is definitely owned by 20th Century Studios. It's the only ones that they're legally allowed to show, I guess. Um, but it's also important to note that there was an alien skull, or a xenomorph skull, if you will, from Alien. So
Yep.
they likely are trying to do a new Alien vs Predator.
Yeah. I just gotta say that movie looks terrible. So,
I'm gonna give it a shot. Obviously, I know you will too. You're gonna watch
yeah.
it. But it definitely looks interesting
Compared
for
to
sure.
Prey, it looks terrible.
Yeah, Prey was very good though.
Yeah, Prey was great.
It's gonna be hard to top.
Okay. Well, we've been going for a little bit. I think we could probably wrap up episode 100, which I think was quite good. Unless you have any closing thoughts.
No, that's here's to 100 more, buddy.
Here's to 100 more. I'll catch you next time then.
All right, see you, pal.
Bye.